Right, greetings everyone. Hello, welcome to the Philosophy Club here. And today is Sunday, the 16th of November. So it's been an exciting week. Lots been happening in the world. I've been quite busy on peace stuff, so I'll catch up with that. So let's do a quick go round. So you know me, I'm Thomas Daffern, a philosopher and historian and peace activist for many years, and now living partly in Britain, partly here in France. So pleasure to be here. Yes.
Well, I'm Jan, and I'm one of your neighbours. I'm a retired salesman, working with various companies. The last 20 years, a French company supplying navigational systems, and so we decided to move down here to this little heart of France, and we have soon been here for a year now. It's about a year since we bought the place next door. We were restoring, we'll put him back up to
the glorious hotel that used to be.
We might be. Mm-hmm. We hope to get there someday, but it takes time.
And you came from Anglesey.
I came from Anglesey,
yeah.
So
which is the Druid stronghold of North Wales, but
yeah.
Apparently they're not living up to their traditions.
The locals there are not happy for foreigners, especially not if they come from England, which is they're very nationalist, but at Anglesey extremely nationalistic, not very helpful to foreigners.
Outcomes.
It's a small island, takes about half an hour from one end to the other to drive. But there's people that's lived their whole life on that little island and never crossed the bridge to the mainland UK. Whoa. Never ever.
Right.
What do we need to do there?
Sure.
There's nothing for me.
There's also military stuff going on.
RAF got an AF base there in Valley. RAF Valley is called, and both the princes, I think, trained
in helicopters and stuff.
Pilot training there.
Good. Well, that's very exciting. Anyway, welcome, Jan.
Okay.
Noah, hello.
Hi, I'm Noah. I'll keep it short because of my English.
You're very fluent.
I'll do my best, thanks. I'm another one of your neighbors. Students. And currently I'm just working in a farm nearby. a couple of days at the week.
Right. Greetings. And you're from Holland, kind of, but French
yes.
by adoption, been here for ages. Yeah, great, welcome.
What are you studying?
Studying? Oh, as a student I meant from...
okay, right, okay, I understand. Yeah.
Noah's been coming to the Philosophy Club for a couple of years.
Yeah, right.
On and off,
okay.
When he's not too busy elsewhere.
Yeah.
Okay, and last but not least, Monty.
Yeah, my name is Monty. I'm traveling around France at the moment and here doing some work away with Thomas. I'm originally from Australia, but I have lived in Norway for a number of years. And I'm working periodically with Doctors Without Borders, Médecins Sans Frontières. And my most recent assignment was in Gaza City.
Yeah, just like earlier this year.
I left in August.
Right. Yeah, but you've been telling me you've been in quite a few places like Afghanistan and Sierra Leone and Médecins Sans Frontières are quite interesting, aren't they?
They have quite a lot of places they work in. Yeah.
But you're the guy that fixes the hospitals, keeps them running. You don't.
Yeah, no, I'm not medical.
Not
no, I don't have a medical background. I'm
but you're an engineer.
Side of things, yeah.
So it's been really great to have you here because you've been fixing all the stuff that doesn't work.
Exactly.
Running a big house is complicated. I'm not an expert plumber and electrician and all that stuff. So when stuff goes, it goes in the mending pile. Monty's been working through the mending pile, which like old lamps that are broken and stuff. He can get stuff working. It's amazing.
Super.
He's a genius.
And they got the spare parts next door.
Yeah, they got exactly.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
That sounds like a great collaboration.
Yeah. So, okay, well, anyway, welcome. And, right, so and this is Bishi, the cat, resident cat, the queen of the centre here. So, okay, so this week's been quite full on, actually. I'm going to share a few things. On Monday, the 10th of November, I attended a thing called the British International Studies Association, conjoint meeting with the International Studies Association, who are Britain and America's leading intellectual thinkers, academics, who look at international relations, international studies, and they're experts in world order, why countries are falling apart, what's going on. Heard some brilliant talks. There was a professor of international studies from Italy who actually teaches in Rome at the Italian Defence College, which does defence studies. There were some other speakers, a guy from the university, I think in central England, who is on the board of the British International Studies Association. So it's quite a high level discussion. And I made a few comments which were basically, I mean, I knew these people years ago. I was a member of the British International Studies Association, BISA, when I was starting at the University of London. And they're very clever. They come together, they do papers, they do PhDs, you know, on all aspects, but they don't actually, like, they're still going to be going, even as the world's on fire. Do you know what I mean? For all their learning, they've not stopped the Gaza Holocaust, they've not stopped the horrors of Ukraine, Russia. So I asked the question, because when I used to go to those meetings, there's a school of international studies which is called the Realist School, which is there've always been nations, they've always been at war. Nothing you can do about it. There's going to be war till the end of the universe. All you can do is like maybe moderate it a bit. And what we do as scholars is we just study, like, you know, tinker a bit around the edges. I said, no, actually, hello, I'm doing peace studies, which has a whole different slant. We're trying to prevent wars. We're trying to ameliorate these tragedies because, like, we had World War I and World War II. Nobody stopped them. They should have done, but they didn't. We can at least stop World War III. The horrors of that would be beyond any possibility of Médecins Sans Frontières dealing with millions and millions and millions of casualties. So we have to have a moral, intervention here. And I just said, like, has BISA and ISA worked this out yet? That was my comment, like, or is peace study still regarded as dangerously idealistic and naive, and therefore, like, you know, not taken seriously? But actually it's very interesting, the Italian lady, who is also a member of the International Peace Research Association, which I've been a member of, I was on the board, heard what I was saying, and she responded brilliantly. She said, no, Thomas, you're absolutely right. We do have to stop these wars. And actually the leading thinkers in ISA and BISA are now beginning to say what I was saying 20 years ago. So that was kind of nice. It was like tapping into a former life, you know, and checking out. I also did my my weekly service in the village community as librarian here, which is always a pleasure. And I checked in and had a training on how to operate the extremely complicated computer system where you have to log all the books in and out.
I heard about it. Complicated indeed.
It is ridiculous, yeah, it's crazy. But anyway, I'm beginning to master it. And then on Wednesday, the 12th, I had a meeting of the French National Committee of the Liberal Democrats, on which I sit, and we're planning a AGM, a conference. We've got a very good speaker coming, who is an MP, in fact, in the British Parliament, called Al Pinkerton. And he's going to talk. He's a professor, actually, at the University of London in international studies. And he's coming to talk about, how we can sort of get Europe back together and how we can repair the damage of Brexit, because we're all very upset and against Brexit, as Liberal Democrats all are. Then we had that evening a very interesting conference online with the Scottish, a sort of Scottish peace group campaigning for Palestine. And we had two really interesting Palestinian academics speaking about, it was in honour of a new film that's come out called Palestine 1936, which is a new kind of blockbuster with superstars, and it's going to be in your cinema soon if it's not already. We have to go and see it. And it's telling a little known story about the uprising from 1936 to 1939 in Palestine by the indigenous peoples, Palestinians. These are two Palestinian academics, very high level, who have done a lot of research. They've published papers on the history of all this. And they say this is the backstory to what's been going on in Gaza. If you don't understand this Palestinian revolt, 1936 to 39, you won't understand what's going on in Gaza. So the data they presented is that the British Empire was not going to let this revolt get away with it, and decided to clamp down on them big time. And through all their troops, they had more troops in Palestine during those 3 years than in the whole of India. They sent like Indian army type people because they were determined not to lose Palestine, because it was a British mandate, and they felt in their playbook that the empire would collapse without Palestine, so they were determined to keep it. The trouble was the indigenous people were determined to kick the British out, or at least to stop the mass immigration of Jews who were now coming in under the Zionist flag at large numbers. I think, 400,000 one year. The population of the Palestinians had been much greater than the Jewish population, but suddenly, in the 1930s under the British, it was coming in the hundreds of thousands. And of course, when Hitler got to power, they were all trying desperately to get to Palestine, because other nations wouldn't accept Jewish people coming in. The British mandate did, because we'd issued this Balfour Declaration saying that the Jews could have a homeland there, without asking the indigenous population, right? There was no like, do you mind if we settle 3 million Jews in your land here? No, none of that. It's just like, that's what's happening. So it was a nightmare, and I think this new film is going to focus, the minds on this. And we discovered that General Montgomery, who I always thought was a good guy, a sort of hero of El Alamein, and I knew people that fought in the Battle of El Alamein, turned out to be a real brutal suppressor of the Palestinians. He was doing mass killings and erasing villages, and so these people were saying, look, it was the British that taught the Israelis, what became the IDF, to do what they're doing in Gaza, because these are British tactics that they practiced in the 1936 to 1939 revolt. And then the Israelis saw, that's how you deal with Palestinians, is it? And so that's what they did in the Nakba, and that's what they've been doing in Gaza. This was the argument of the papers and the professors who were speaking. They are learned people who've done their research and written books about it, so I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. It might not be, there would be room for discussion about, the rights and wrongs and ethics of war. I'm totally opposed to war. I wouldn't want any of that going on. But on the other hand, I suppose from the British imperial perspective, they felt that Hitler was rearming, World War II was in the offing. He was making extreme anti-Semitic, gestures, and very anti-British, etc. So the British thought that there's a war coming with Germany. We can't afford to lose Palestine, so we have to keep it. So as always, history is full of competing narratives which clash, and unfortunately, normal, ordinary people get slaughtered. So anyway, it's really good discussions, and that was fascinating. The next day, I had a meeting of the youth wing of the Liberal Democrats in France, who were meeting in Paris at the Sciences Po, which I attended, organised by one of our committee members, who is a young British lady who lives in Paris and works there. And Sciences Po is like the LSE in Britain. It's where they train people in political science. So a lot of top politicians go to the Sciences Po. I've been to meetings there before. And we had a Labour, Tory and Liberal Democrat youth leader speaking about their policies. By youth I mean sort of 20s. And they were, it was an interesting debate. I think the Liberal Democrat lady, Hannah Bettesworth, who's very intelligent, I think, was the most coherent. The Labour guy was quite good, actually, and he was singing the praises of what Labour's done. The Tory guy was absolutely, you could hardly hear him, and he was really pathetic, sorry to say. Incoherent, ramblings. But then that's what you expect from Tories. I mean, sorry, I am biased here. I mean, they ruined my country, they brought in Brexit, they've weaponised polarities, identity politics, they're in hock to Trump. I mean, yeah, I'm not a fan of the Tory party, and this guy they wheeled on as a representative was just like, I mean, I'm sure he was quite a nice guy. He was actually Iranian British, but it was ironic to be lectured by an Iranian British guy about what is true Britain. What do British people really want? Well, they want more Brexit, But I mean, it's ironic to hear that. So anyway, that was interesting. Thank you for organising it. And then the next, on the 15th, yesterday, I attended the European Movement AGM. I think all these groups have their AGMs around this time of year. And I'm a member of this. This is a body set up by Winston Churchill after World War II to try and bring the European nations together into a friendly, into more friendly relations than during World War II and in the run-up to World War II. So the French and the Germans said, okay, we'll never go to war again. We'll all join the European movement. Winston Churchill went around giving speeches saying, let all Europeans come together and be friends. And he founded this thing which is still going. And it's got many thousands of members in all European countries. The British wing is the biggest. And I've been a member of it for a while. And it was its AGM. And the Secretary General is a man called Dr. Now, I think he's Mike Galsworthy, who used to who runs Scientists Against Brexit. And back about 5 years ago, when I was posting ferociously against Brexit, as a philosopher, he was doing the same as a scientist. He was saying, this makes no sense, Brexit. All the great scientists of Europe want to go and study in each other's countries. We all do funding together, we research grants. We need to be able to go to Holland or other European countries. So he's a very good man, actually, very clever chap. And we also heard from a guy called Sir Nicholas Harvey, or Sir Nick Harvey, who is the CEO of this thing, the European movement, who was a former Lib Dem MP for many years. And he was even briefly Defence Secretary under the coalition government between Lib Dems and Tories for a few years. They managed to, steady the ship of state for a bit before the Tory party went mad and turned into a hard right, Faragist body. So, and we also heard from Dominic Grieve, who was one of the liberal, moderate Tories who was utterly opposed to Brexit. He's a president of the European movement, a highly clever man, who was an Oxford graduate in history. He said in his speech, because it was in Oxford, this is coming from Oxford, he said, it's funny to be here. I haven't been here since I sat my finals in my undergraduate degree at Oxford, like 40 years ago, when he was a history student. And he said he had to sit in that same hall at Little Test writing essays for like 10 days. And now he was back. So obviously the European movement hired the example at the University of Oxford. But he gave a brilliant speech. He remains a live wire. He was a very good MP. He isn't anymore an MP. I think he should join the Lib Dems. He's sort of partyless because the Conservative Party he used to belong to is gone. It doesn't exist. They're hard right-wing nutters. So he's much more of a Lib Dem type. He spoke brilliantly. And then we heard a brilliant lecture by Professor Timothy Garton-Ash, who's a historian at the University of Oxford. And he spoke about his work. I knew him years ago when I was running Philosophers of Peace and going to Moscow in the early 90s. And he was going around Eastern Europe writing articles, meeting people like Václav Havel, the Czech leader, and other reformists. And he's been following all this stuff for years. He's like Britain's Timothy Snyder, who is an expert on East European politics at Yale. Anyway, a genius, I would say, is old, lecturer. Timothy, and heard a brilliant lecture from him. And then there was discussions and questions, and I got a few points in, you know. But yeah, so well done, the European movement. It was a successful meeting. And I wanted to ask them specifically about my, you know, proposal for a European Peace Agency, which is the other thing I've been up to this week, continuing to develop this proposal for a European Peace Agency along the lines of the European Space Agency. I do not understand why, if Europe can spend £7 billion a year monitoring the stars and getting all the great astronomers and scientists and engineers of Europe together to focus on that, which is a worthy cause. I love space science. We can at least have a parallel thing called the European Peace Agency that has the same budget, the same member nations. The UK belongs to it. And we could have telescopes specially designed to see if we can spot peace anywhere. I mean, they'd be looking at society, they'd be watching human beings' behaviour, you know. So we get the European Peace Agency. Anyway, so I'm been active on that. And it's very probable, well, I mean, I've argued in the foundational document that it should be based in Ireland, because Ireland is a peace-loving country, it's a neutral country. Of all the European nations, it's kind of the least bellicose because it's suffered imperialism and occupation and all that. And so I think it should be headquartered in Dublin. So that's what we're planning. And then we have a meeting for that proposal on the 10th of December, which I've been alerting people to online. And then what else? So in all my spare time, I've been working hard on my current writing project, which is the autobiography, because in my life I try and keep track of it as I go along and write it up. And the last volume I did was ended in 2017, which was the year I kind of moved here finally. And what's happened since, I've been too busy to write it up. But now I'm determined, with the death of my daughter, to kind of write up the years from 2018 to 2025. So I'm deep in the heart of 2019 at the moment. And it's what I love about writing one's autobiography is it's like revisiting one's past life in depth. And you discover stuff you didn't really have time to notice at the time. And I keep a daily diary, so I can do all this. So I've been down to the Pyrenees this week, to the Mary Magdalene Studies Association, which I went to in July and August. And I've just been to Slovenia to a conference of the Old Faiths Association of Slovenia, with some very high-pressured intellectuals meeting. It was really in honour of this guy, Dr. Schmargo Schmittek. And this guy was an anthropologist and expert in Slovenian mythology and folklore. And he and another guy who I met had discovered, by doing interviews with older people living up in the mountains, that the ancient pagan faiths of Slovenia had survived underground for millennia. The Christians tried to kill them all, but they didn't succeed, and they lived on in their villages, worshipping the old gods and knowing the sacred sites, caves where the goddess lived, and the mythology of the three worlds, which is symbolised by the picture. And this guy, who I didn't meet, he's dead now, but I met a chap called Pavel Medvedek, who was too old to come to our conference, and he died the year after, but I had a long discussion with him, and he was a real expert on Slovenian paganism. And he had spent 20 years studying the belief systems of these locals in this region of Slovenia, interviewing them, and they confided in him, yeah, this is what we practice, which he wrote up. So, and I was invited to give a lecture about my studies on Druidry in Europe, because there were Celts in the Alps, and there were Celts even in parts of Slovenia. So there would have been Druids at that time, and all down the Danube. It was a lot of Druids around. So we were discussing, I gave a paper about Druidry in its European context. It wasn't just in Britain and Ireland and Wales, it was also in Austria, Switzerland, you know, the Alpine region. It was down the Rhine Valley. It was all here in France, in Gaul. The Druids were the Celtic wisdom teachers, and so I was invited to go and give a talk about that. And I was revisiting it all. Who did I meet? And what? And I was looking up. These other people on the platform were amazing. There was one woman who was a musicologist who did a performance and spoke about shamanic music. She was an expert in shamanism and the use of music, sounds, to transport people to other dimensions. And she lived and travelled throughout the Americas meeting shamans, Siberia, going around all Europe. And she was like Slovenia's leading expert on all this. I've got actually a CD she gave me. I just discovered today she's died in 23, but I had the fortune to meet her. And she believed music was the universal language of our ancestors. So, and that's why the Druids were also bards who sang, as they do in all these traditions. And the other thing, when I was in Ljubljana for this conference, there was a visiting exhibition at the National Museum of Ethnology at Ljubljana, and it was from the St. Petersburg Ethnographic Museum. So they had all these things on shamanism shipped in from Russia, showing in Ljubljana, which were like magical coats they wear, drums, rattles, all the magical accoutrements that shamans use in Siberia, which the Russians had been studying for decades. And they were on loan to the museum in Ljubljana, including old footage of old black and white films showing actual shamans doing their rituals and things in Siberia, shot in the 20s and before by early anthropologists. So it was absolutely fascinating to revisit all this. And yes, that's why I bother with it, because I mean, I think Socrates said an unexamined life is not worth living. I think we should be examining our lives as we go through. So that's, and then the last thing to say is I've got the International Delphic Academy meeting coming up on the 30th of this month. And our dear friend Alexander Beauharnais, who is a good friend and a descendant of Josephine Beauharnais, the wife of Napoleon, is very ill and had a heart attack. He's in a hospital in New York. So greetings to Alexander. I hope he gets well. He's surrounded by love and light. Many people have been sending him prayers. He seems to be pulling through, because it was touch and go. He sort of wanted to, but you know, he probably won't. I mean, he won't be well enough to come to that meeting, but we will have it. He's on the board of the Delphic Academy. So that's a little glimpse of Thomas's week. Meanwhile, you know, international idiocy continues in Trump world. Any comments or extra things I've missed out here from anyone? You said something about what Trump world's up to. Do you want to share?
No, well, he's falling out with everybody as usual. Suing BBC now. He says he's going to sue them next week from between $1 and $5 billion.
The guy's mad.
Because
he'll never win.
Because they twisted his words. So that's worth a few $1 billion.
Billions? Wow.
Between $1 and $5 billion. I have to do it, he says.
Well,
on his way on board the Air Force One to fly down to Florida to do his couple of 18-hole rounds of golf during the weekend, while the world just trots on. I guess he's just planning another world peace somewhere. I think he is apparently also moved the majority of his war fleet into southern end of Caribbean. So I guess he's just going to start a war with Venezuela so that he can make peace there.
Now that's a good idea. Start the war, then you make peace.
Yeah, I think that's his plan there.
That's a clever idea. Yeah. I don't think. I mean, I know people that work for the BBC. I've done a few things myself. I think one shouldn't be afraid of Trump. It's time to call his bluff, and his behaviour. If it were to go to court in London,
won't get anywhere.
I don't think it'll get anywhere. But B, if there was a trial, I think a load of stuff might come out. about Trump, what Trump does, the bullying, the aggressiveness, and above all the dodgy dealings with Russia behind the scenes. So I've just finished this book. Another thing to say is this Peter Struzhnok wrote this book called Compromised about Trump and Russia, and it's really quite interesting to read the details of how much they have on Trump and yet didn't action it. I mean, it's a terrible mistake of the American intelligence services. They could prove he was in bed with Russia, even though he kept denying it. These are facts that they have information on. So of course he's desperate to silence all that and fire the people that knew it and threaten them with legal action. It's a misuse of the courts, in my opinion.
Well, he's got his little blondies now to run the courts, the department.
Independence of
Kavanaugh and the Supreme Court, you mean?
Supreme Court.
Yeah, Brett
Pam,
Kavanaugh and
Pam Blondie, as I call her, Blondie.
Sure. Yeah, but I think I trust and pray that American democracy is resilient enough to withstand all this. There's enough people now posting stuff. As more of these emails come out about the Epstein case and he was in bed with Epstein, possibly literally on some occasions. It's just unthinkable that this man should still be running the show.
He claims he's so innocent, so why does he oppose? That's the question all the Americans ask themselves.
Yeah, why won't he release the emails?
Why won't he release? Why is he so strongly opposing the release of these documents?
So the other thing that one of the Substack things that I get regularly said is that Putin has access to all the Epstein files. Don't ask me how, but apparently he does. And he knows all the details of what Trump was up to with Epstein over the years. And so that's leverage that Putin has over Trump. So why he's saying, no, you can't give Ukraine any weapons, or I'll release the details. And this guy, it's a learned chap, has worked out that's what's been happening. And that's why Putin has silenced Trump and treats him like a poodle. Going right back to the famous briefing when Trump and Putin met for the first time and in Helsinki and gave, talks, and Putin had a secret meeting with Trump that no one was allowed to attend. Well, what were they discussing? They were discussing what Putin had on Trump, and you better behave, man. And it's been, so that's, the Americans are finally working out this is probably what's been happening. And that's why Putin is very happy when he was able to leverage him into the White House, because he's their man, So I think Americans, when they realise this, I think Trump will go to jail. I still think he'll either go to jail or a madhouse. He belongs in either, and I'm not fussed which. He certainly doesn't belong in the White House, knocking it down.
We should team up with Netanyahu in that jail.
Yeah, we could have a special island, couldn't we, for crazy people. Since you raised Israel and the Gaza war, nobody seems to have done. I just want to say that I've discovered another great thing this week. I've discovered a wonderful Israeli MP in the Knesset. Now, I've been to the Knesset, and I know a chap called Shlomo Soham, a philosopher, who was the ombudsman for the future, appointed by the Knesset back in the day when there were moral people there, who was supposed to look at all the legislation and say, is this bill going to be appreciated 200 years from now? The ombudsman from the future. And if not, we won't pass it. He could advise MPs, right? A very clever man who wrote a book called Future Intelligence. He said we should factor into our lives the future. Anyway, I found this amazing Israeli MP who belongs to a party called the Democrat Party. There is one. And she is self-confessed socialist. It's connected to the old Labour Party. She's called